A retired canine collapsed on the station floor, refusing to let go of a filthy teddy bear. It wasn't just a toy. It was a message from a missing child, and time was running out. The storm came in fast, turning the streets of Marlow into rivers of mud and broken branches. Wind screamed through the alleyways, rain hammering down like it was trying to drown the whole town. Most people stayed home, lights off, doors locked, hoping it would pass. But at exactly 2:17 a.m., the heavy doors of the Marlow Police Department slammed open, banging against the walls like they'd been kicked by a ghost. In the doorway stood a dog, a German shepherd, soaked to the bone, his fur matted with mud and streaks of something darker. Blood, dried and fresh, clung to his side. One ear was torn. He limped forward, every step labored, as if he had dragged himself through fire to get there. But even in that state, even with pain pulling at every movement, his jaws were clenched around something small and soaked. A teddy bear. Old, torn, one button eye missing, its fur filthy and damp. A child's toy, the kind left behind in hospital rooms or lost under beds. It was held gently between the dog's teeth, not bitten or chewed, but protected like it was the most important thing in the world. Officer Riley, who had been nursing coffee and scrolling through paperwork behind the front desk, jumped to his feet. What the hell? The dog took 2 more steps, then collapsed on the cold tile floor. His breathing was loud, uneven. But when Riley moved toward him, hand out, slow and calm, the dog lifted his head and growled. Not loud, just enough. A warning. Don't touch it. Riley froze, eyes locked on the dog's. They weren't wild. They weren't afraid. They were focused, sharp, tired, but alive. And behind that warning growl was something else, too. Something harder to name. Desperation, duty, pain. The bear was clenched tight in his jaws, like it held the last piece of something he couldn't afford to lose. Get the vet on the line, Riley called over his shoulder, not taking his eyes off the dog. And bring a gurney, now. Others rushed in, some in uniform, some in plain clothes. The sheriff, a rookie deputy, a medic, off duty. No one knew where the dog had come from. No tag, no collar, no harness. Just the bear. One of the deputies stepped too close. The dog tensed, a low growl building in his chest. Blood pooled slowly under his paw. But still, he did not let go. Officer Riley crouched down, voice low. Okay, buddy. Okay. We're not going to take it. You did good. Just hang on. The dog blinked once, then lowered his head, bear still between his teeth. No one knew yet what was inside the bear. No one guessed what the dog had crossed to get there. But something in that moment settled over the room like truth. This wasn't just a stray. This wasn't just luck. This dog was trying to tell them something. And whatever it was, started with that bear. The dog finally allowed them close once the bear was placed beside him on the examination table. He had fought sedation for nearly 10 minutes, growling low each time a needle neared him. But the moment Officer Riley gently set the teddy bear by his muzzle, something in the shepherd gave in. His breathing slowed. His eyes blinked once. Then, with a deep sigh, he rested his head against the toy and let the medicine pull him under. Dr. Keller, the town's on-call veterinarian, worked quickly, cleaning wounds and checking for broken bones. He muttered words like dehydration, infection, and scar tissue. But Riley wasn't watching the dog anymore. He was staring at the teddy bear. It looked even worse up close. The seams were stretched, the fur worn to threads, and one of the arms had been sewn back on using mismatched red thread. Someone had tried to save it. Someone had cared enough to fix it, even if they didn't have the tools or the skill. Riley turned it over in his hands, noting how one side of the bear felt stiffer than the other. He hesitated for a moment, then picked up a scalpel from the tray. With careful hands, he cut a small line along the back seam. Old stuffing spilled out, clumped and yellowed with time. But buried deeper, hidden near the center of the bear's body, was something strange. A small pouch, barely larger than a thumb, sewn directly into the toy's fabric. It had a zipper, Riley's heart started to beat harder as he unzipped it and reached inside. Out came a tiny object, tightly wrapped in layers of foil. He peeled it open and revealed a micro SD card. The room went still. "Someone get me a secure laptop," Riley said. His voice was low but urgent. Minutes later, a detective placed a department-issued laptop on the desk. No internet connection, just internal access. Riley inserted the card, fingers hovering above the keys for a breath, before clicking into the files. There were folders, dozens of them, some named with dates, others with codes, and one simply titled, "They Took Us." The first video played without sound. It showed a girl, no older than 7, sitting on a bare mattress in a dimly lit room. She clutched the same teddy bear, eyes wide, lip trembling. She looked straight into the camera and whispered something they couldn't hear. Riley recognized the bear instantly. It was the same one lying next to the dog, the same bear that had led them here. Another folder opened to scan documents, passports, ID photos, medical records. Another contained audio files of children's voices. A spreadsheet listed names, ages, cities. Some names had check marks. Others were highlighted in red. The room was silent. Someone whispered, "Is this real?" Riley didn't answer. His hand hovered over the trackpad, frozen. He didn't want to see more, but he knew they had to. This wasn't just a missing person case. This was a ledger, a record of children, tracked, taken, documented. And the only reason they had it now was because a wounded dog had carried it in his mouth, hidden inside a broken toy, through a storm, straight to their door. Whatever this was, it wasn't over. It was just beginning. The video opened with a soft click, the screen flickering once before it showed the inside of a small, windowless room. The walls were bare, gray, and cold, like the place had forgotten how to feel warm. In the middle sat a little girl, knees pulled to her chest, barefoot, and wearing pajamas that looked 2 sizes too small. Her hair was tangled, face streaked with tears and dirt. She didn't flinch at the camera. She looked straight into it, like she knew someone was going to be watching someday. In her arms was the teddy bear. Even battered and patched, it was unmistakable. The same one the dog had carried in, clutched now to her chest like it was the only thing keeping her together. She ran her fingers along its torn ear, her mouth trembling. "My name is Callie," she whispered. Her voice was hoarse, like she'd been crying for hours or screaming into silence. "I'm 6.5. I don't know where I am." The officers in the room leaned in closer. The camera's timestamp was from 3 weeks ago. Callie sniffed, wiping her nose with the back of her hand. "They took me after school. Said my mom was in the hospital, but she's not. I know she's not." She looked down at the bear, holding it tighter. "I told Max to go," she said. "I told him to find help." Then she looked up again, eyes locking onto the lens like she could see through it, like she was staring right at them. "He'll find me," she said. "Teddy knows where I am. So does Max." The room went dead quiet. Officer Riley sat back slowly, staring at the screen. Did she just say Max? Detective Harlan, who'd been typing notes, paused. That's what it sounded like. Riley stood, crossed the room, and opened the file from the dog's microchip scan. The information had come in an hour ago from the vet's office, tucked between details about breed and vaccination dates. Name, Max. Breed, German Shepherd. Registered handler, Lena Torres. Former canine unit, West County. Status, retired. Riley's mouth went dry. "It's him," he said. "The dog's name is Max." No one said a word. They all looked back at the screen, where the little girl had gone quiet again. She was humming softly now, a tune no one recognized. Something a child might make up when she didn't want to cry anymore. She rocked back and forth, clutching the bear tighter. Detective Harlan reached over and paused the video. "We need to find out who this girl is, and we need to know where she was taken." Riley didn't move. His eyes were still on the screen. "She knew he'd come," he said quietly. "That dog. He came all this way because she asked him to." Harlan shook his head. If Max was retired, What's he doing showing up out of nowhere, carrying this toy? He's doing what he was trained to do, Riley said. He's bringing someone home. And now they finally had a name. A girl. A face. A trail. Max hadn't just found them by accident. He had followed orders from a child who believed in him more than anyone else. And he had delivered the message. A year before Max stumbled into the Marlow Police Department with a teddy bear in his jaws, he was something else entirely. He wasn't a stray. He wasn't limping through storms on torn paws. He was a canine, sharp and unstoppable, working beside Officer Lena Torres in the Missing Persons Unit. They were known as the unit's best. If a child vanished, if a trail went cold, Max and Lena were the ones called in. Over the years, they found runaway teens hiding in barns, lost toddlers in cornfields, and even an elderly woman who'd wandered into a ravine. Max had a gift. His nose, yes, but also something more. He could read people. He could read Lena. They worked like a single mind split between human and dog. Lena had joined the force straight out of the academy, fueled by something she never talked about. She kept a photo of a girl on her locker. No one knew who she was. She never took it down. Max was assigned to her after his original handler retired. On their first day together, Max refused to get into the cruiser until Lena opened the back door, patted the seat, and said, "Let's go find somebody." From that day forward, Max never left her side. Then came the Monroe case. Callie Monroe, age 7, disappeared walking home from school. Her mother had called in a panic. Said she was only 3 blocks away. Said Callie had her favorite bear with her, the one she never let go of. It was broad daylight. People had been outside, and yet no one saw anything. The team hit the ground fast. Max picked up a scent from a crumpled candy wrapper near the crosswalk, led them through backyards, through an alley, across a small field, and straight to a spot behind a grocery store where the trail went dead. Just stopped. No blood. No dropped items. No sign of struggle. It was as if Callie had been lifted off the ground and vanished into the air. Max searched for days. He refused to eat. He growled at anyone who got too close to the little pink backpack recovered from a dumpster 3 blocks away. When Lena took him home at night, he paced. When she tried to rest, he whined. On the 4th day, he sat by the front door, tail still, eyes locked on nothing, as if he was waiting for someone who wasn't coming. When the case went cold, Lena changed. She stopped smiling. She stopped speaking much at all. She fought with her superiors. She blamed herself. Max started acting out too, barking at odd hours, refusing certain commands. The final straw came during a training drill. Max ignored every cue and tried to run. They found him at the edge of town, nose in the wind, body shaking. They said he was broken. They said he was done. Lena refused to have him reassigned. She turned in her badge. She took Max home and told the department she needed time. But time didn't help. 3 months later, Lena was gone, moved without warning, left no address. And Max? One morning the backyard gate was found open, his collar hanging on the hook by the door. There were paw prints in the dirt leading away from the house. No one ever saw him again. Until now. He hadn't just vanished. He had been searching. Even without backup, without Lena, without orders, Max had stayed on the case. He had never stopped. Callie was still out there, and Max was still on assignment. The hallway outside the squad room was quiet except for the hum of the old vending machine and the soft tap of someone's shoes against the tile. Officer Riley stood by the door, hands in his pockets, watching as a woman stepped out of the rain and into the building like she was walking into a memory she had been trying to outrun for a year. Her name was Dana Monroe. She looked like she hadn't slept in days, maybe weeks. Her hair was pulled back in a rushed ponytail, her coat soaked through at the shoulders. She held a photo in one hand and something crumpled in the other, a tissue that had long since given up. Riley met her at the front desk. "Mrs. Monroe, I'm Officer Riley. Thank you for coming in." She nodded once, eyes distant, jaw tight like she was trying not to fall apart in public. "We found something," he said gently. "It's about Callie." Her breath caught. For a second she looked like she might fall. Riley guided her into the squad room where Detective Harlan waited by the laptop. The screen was paused on the image of the little girl, her arms wrapped tightly around the teddy bear, her small face lit by the camera's dim light. Dana didn't speak at first. She just walked forward slowly, eyes locked on the screen. Then her hand went to her mouth, and she made a sound, half sob, half breath, like all the air had left her body. "That's her," she whispered. "That's my baby." Riley glanced at Harlan, then back at Dana. "We believe this footage was recorded within the last few weeks. She was still alive then." Dana fell into the nearest chair, shaking. "The bear. She's holding it. I made that bear. I sewed it by hand when she was 5. She named it Buttons because of the eyes. One fell off last year. I tried to fix it but didn't have a match." She reached into her bag and pulled out a second photo, worn from handling. In it, Callie sat on the porch steps, holding the same teddy bear and smiling through a missing front tooth. "She took it everywhere," Dana said, tears running freely now. "Even to school. Said it kept the nightmares away." They let her sit there for a long moment, before Harlan quietly tapped the keyboard and played another part of the footage. It was audio only, low, crackling, but clear enough to hear the shift of footsteps, the creak of a door, and then a voice. "Stop crying. If you want to eat, you know what to do." Dana froze. Her head turned slowly toward the speaker like someone had poured ice down her spine. Riley watched her carefully. "Do you recognize that voice?" She nodded slowly, lips trembling. "Yes." "Who is it?" She swallowed hard. "That's my brother, Aaron." No one moved. Even the air seemed to still. "He said he wanted to help," Dana whispered. "Said he'd keep an eye on her while I worked double shifts. I thought he was trying to make things right." She wiped her face, trying to pull herself together, but the weight of it was too much. "I trusted him," she said, her voice cracking. "I let him near her." Riley knelt beside her. "We'll find her, and we'll bring her home." Dana looked at the screen again, at the girl clutching the bear, whispering about Max. She nodded once, firm. She believed in that dog, she said. He was her best friend. She said he could always find her. And now he had. FBI agent Karen Dwyer arrived the next morning, her badge clipped to a rain-slick coat and a tablet already in hand. She had sharp eyes and a way of asking questions that didn't sound like questions at all. Within an hour, she had reviewed the footage, the micro SD card contents, and Max's handler history. By noon, she had opened a new federal case file: Callie Monroe, active child abduction, suspected trafficking, linked to family. "Start digging," she told the tech team. "Deep." They did. Old files came to the surface, records that hadn't seen light in decades. School reports, child welfare alerts, police visits that never led anywhere. Dana Monroe's childhood home had been flagged more than once for noise complaints, suspected neglect, suspected abuse, but each time, things got smoothed over. Relatives vouched for each other. Neighbors looked the other way. And somehow, the reports stopped. Dwyer stood in the squad room flipping through a printed file with narrowed eyes. "Aaron Monroe was a suspect in a separate investigation 5 years ago," she said. "Teenage girl," said he touched her. She recanted 2 days later. No charges filed. Dana hadn't known. She said so through tears. She had been pregnant with Callie at the time, working 2 jobs, barely speaking to her brother. He had drifted in and out of her life, sometimes helpful, sometimes strange, but she never imagined. The agents kept digging. On one of Callie's school evaluations, a note stood out, written by her first-grade teacher. "Callie is shy but extremely alert, sensitive to noise, strong bond with her dog, hesitant around male adults." The file also mentioned a school counselor report. Callie had told someone that Uncle Aaron makes her scared, but it had been dismissed. The wording wasn't clear. There was no physical evidence. The report ended with a line that made Dwyer's jaw tighten. "Likely a misunderstanding, referred to parent." "She was trying to tell us," Dwyer said, and no one listened. Then there was Max. A behavior report from nearly a year ago had flagged him as agitated during one of Aaron's visits to the Monroe home. He had growled, stood between Callie and Aaron, even snapped once when Aaron moved too fast. They chalked it up to age, to stress, to training breakdown. But now, looking back, it was something else. He was warning them, Riley said. He knew. Dogs don't lie, Dwyer replied. But people do, and sometimes they lie so well they convince themselves. Max had tried to protect Callie before, and when no one listened, when the system failed, he hadn't stopped. He just waited for the right moment. And when that moment came, when Callie needed him most, he had gone out into the world to bring her message back. He had crossed woods, roads, rivers, and storms with nothing but a bear in his mouth and a memory in his head. Now the truth was out. It had been buried in silence, wrapped in shame, passed from one adult to the next like something too heavy to hold. But Callie hadn't forgotten, and Max never let it go. Not then, not now. Max opened his eyes slowly, the white glow of the vet clinic's lights reflecting in the dark pools of his gaze. His breathing was steady now, no longer labored, but his body trembled with the effort it took just to lift his head. Dr. Keller stood nearby, clipboard in hand, murmuring to the officer at his side. Bruised ribs, torn pads, infection starting in one of the gashes along his back leg. Any other dog would have needed weeks to recover. Max had only been out for 2 days. Officer Riley stepped into the room quietly and knelt beside the metal recovery kennel. In his hands, he held the one thing that had brought Max to them in the first place, the teddy bear. He set it down gently on the edge of the blanket. Max stared at it for a long moment, then moved his muzzle forward and gave it a single lick, soft and slow, like a whisper. Then, without hesitation, he pushed himself up. Not all the way, not steady, but enough to place one paw forward and turn his head toward the door. Riley watched, heart thudding. "You want to show us something, don't you?" he said. Max didn't look back. He just stood there, swaying slightly, ears up. An hour later, Max was loaded into the back of a squad SUV, IV still taped to his front leg, bandages wrapped tight. Dwyer and Riley rode up front, a GPS tracker blinking on the dash. The vet had warned them this wasn't standard. Max wasn't stable. But no one could argue with the way he watched the road, nose pressed to the glass, like he knew exactly where he was going. They drove slowly at first, but Max whined each time they passed a turnoff he didn't agree with. At the third protest, Riley said, "Let's try letting him decide." It started with a small turn onto a dirt road, then another. Then came the creeks, low, winding channels of water cutting across broken bridges and forgotten trails. Max pawed at the window when they came too close to town, but perked up each time they veered into wooded areas. He was tracking something, memory maybe, or scent. They followed him for hours, past old barns with collapsed roofs, through rust-colored woods and long stretches of empty hills. The sun dropped lower in the sky until the trees glowed with gold, then dimmed into shadows. At a sharp bend, Max barked once. Riley stopped the car. "What is it, boy?" he asked. Max was already climbing over the seat before Riley opened the door. Limping but focused, he trotted toward the edge of the woods. They followed with flashlights and quiet steps, weapons holstered but hands ready. They reached a clearing bordered by pine trees, half swallowed by thorns and vines. In the middle stood an old hunting shack, barely upright, its wooden walls gray with age. Max paused, ears flicking, nose to the wind. Then they heard it. A whimper, faint, like the sound of a kitten or a bird, but it wasn't. Max lowered himself to the ground and crept forward, nose pressed to the dirt beneath the shack. His tail thumped once. He let out a low, quiet bark, the kind a dog makes when he's found exactly what he was looking for. Riley knelt, ear to the boards. Another whimper. A child's voice, weak, muffled. They were in the right place. Max had brought them to her. The shack groaned with age as Riley and Agent Dwyer approached it, their boots crunching over dead leaves and broken twigs. Max circled the building, nose to the ground, barking sharply now, no longer trying to be quiet. He scratched at the walls, then darted to the door and stood still, tail stiff, body trembling. Riley reached the rusted handle and pulled. The door creaked open with a shriek of old hinges. Inside, the air was thick with dust, and something else, something stale, like old sweat and damp wood. The flashlight beams cut across the space, revealing a room barely bigger than a shed. One broken chair, a stained mattress in the corner, stacks of canned food, and a single blanket folded neatly on the floor. Next to the mattress was a tiny shoe. Riley picked it up gently, turning it over in his hand. It was pink, with a little purple butterfly stitched on the side. The kind of shoe a little girl would wear to school. The kind that should never end up here. Max didn't wait for permission. He bounded inside and went straight to the floorboards, nose pressed flat, breathing hard through his snout. He barked again, louder this time, then pawed at the wood, digging at a section near the far wall where a pile of old newspapers sat. Dwyer moved fast, tossing the papers aside. Beneath them, a seam, a square cut into the floor, barely noticeable unless you knew where to look. Riley grabbed a crowbar from the truck and returned within seconds. He jammed it into the edge and pried. With a crack, the trapdoor gave way, revealing a narrow hole beneath the shack. Dust and cold air drifted up like a whisper. The space was too small for an adult to stand in, barely tall enough to crouch. It smelled like old dirt and mildew. Riley dropped to his knees and shone the light down. The cellar was empty, but the walls, those told a different story. Dozens of drawings were taped up and pinned with bits of tape and string, crayon scribbles on the backs of flyers, and torn notebook pages. One showed a little girl with brown hair holding a teddy bear. Another showed a black and tan dog standing between her and a man with angry eyes. Several pictures showed a red house with flames coming out the windows. Some were hard to look at, dark figures looming behind doors, stick figures with tears, a girl hiding under a bed. Max stared down into the hole, tail drooping, ears pinned back. He whined low and long, the sound curling into the stillness like grief. "She was here," Riley said softly. "No doubt about it." "She's not here now," Dwyer replied. Her voice was tight. "They moved her." Riley climbed down into the cellar, crouching beside the wall of drawings. One of them was newer than the others, the ink still sharp. It showed the teddy bear in full detail, stitches and all. Next to it was a dog with a star on his collar. Below them were the words, spelled wrong but clear, "Max will come." Riley looked back up at the dog standing over the opening. "She believed in you," he whispered. And she had been right. But now the trail was cold again. Max lowered his head and gave the air one long sniff, as if trying to pull her scent back out of the dirt. Then, slowly, he turned and walked to the edge of the shack, nose twitching, eyes scanning the woods. He wasn't done yet. Not by a long shot. Riley stood inside the cramped cellar, the drawings spread out on the floor around him like puzzle pieces. Most were scribbles of fear, dark shadows, red flames, and stick figures with sad eyes. But one drawing pulled him in more than the rest. It was neat, as if drawn with more care. A building stood beside a lake, the water colored bright blue, the trees tall and green. But the building had red marks across the roof, sharp, jagged lines that clearly meant fire. Above it was a sign written in shaky crayon letters, "Lake Minna Children's Retreat." He climbed back up into the shack and handed the drawing to Agent Dwyer. "You know this place?" he asked. Dwyer took it, eyes narrowing. "Lake Minna. It used to be a summer camp, back in the 90s, burned down after an electrical fire. No kids were hurt, but the place was shut down for good. Private property now, owned by some kind of nonprofit. Nobody's used it in years." "Except someone has," Riley said, glancing around the broken shack. "Someone brought her here. Someone's still moving her." Dwyer grabbed her phone and started checking satellite maps. "It's about 40 miles east, off Route 16, up in the hills. Pretty remote." Riley looked toward Max, who was pacing at the edge of the shack now, sniffing the wind, tail low but alert. His body was tired, the bandages around his leg dirty from the walk, but his eyes were sharp. He knew the trail wasn't done. "Hang on," Riley said, walking back to the car. A moment later, he returned with the teddy bear. Max froze. Riley knelt and held it out gently. "You want to lead us, boy? You take this." Max stepped forward and opened his mouth. He didn't snatch the toy. He took it slow, careful, placing his jaws around the bear like he had the night he arrived at the station. As soon as the fabric touched his teeth, his tail gave a single, tired wag. Then he turned and started walking. He didn't wait for a command, didn't need one. His legs were sore, his side still healing, but his steps were firm. He followed the trail through the woods behind the shack, nose to the ground, every so often stopping to sniff the air, then changing direction. Riley and Dwyer followed close behind, flashlights sweeping wide as the sky turned to dusk. They crossed a dry creek bed, climbed a steep ridge, and passed the rusted frame of a swing set long swallowed by weeds. Max paused there, stared at the horizon, then looked back at Riley with a soft growl deep in his chest. "He remembers," Riley whispered, and Max kept going. Back at the shack, the drawing of Lake Minna fluttered in the breeze left by the open trapdoor. In the picture, the bear and the dog stood beside the lake like sentries, waiting. Max knew where he was going. He had waited long enough. And now he was ready to finish what he started. The old Lake Minna Children's Retreat sat quiet at the edge of the woods, hidden by trees that had grown wild over 20 years. The lake behind it shimmered silver under the early morning light, calm and still, like it had no idea what the place beside it had become. The main lodge looked abandoned, roof sagging, windows boarded, vines curling up its walls like the forest had tried to swallow it whole. But Max didn't hesitate. As the vehicles pulled to a stop just down the hill, he jumped out, bear still clutched in his mouth, and headed straight for the building. Riley and Agent Dwyer followed with a team of officers and federal agents in tactical gear, their boots pounding across the overgrown path, rifles at the ready. No one spoke. The air was too heavy, too tight. Max led them to the back door, a crooked frame that groaned as they forced it open. Inside, the lodge smelled of mildew and dust, but beneath that, something else, something foul. The flashlight beams moved across empty bunks and old furniture, but it was the floorboards that drew Max's attention. He pawed at the corner of a rug, then barked once, sharp and clear. Beneath the rug was a trapdoor with a thick metal latch. "Here," Riley called. They pried it open and descended into the dark. The basement was wide and cold, the walls bare cement. It should have been storage space, but it wasn't. Chains hung from hooks in the walls. A pile of old children's clothing sat in the corner, mixed sizes, different colors. There were shoes, too small for grown feet. A folding table held a stack of photographs, most of them blurred or out of focus, but every single one of them showed children. The room fell into a thick silence. Riley stepped back, his face pale. Then Max moved to the far wall, sniffing fast, tail stiff. He circled a shelf of boxes, then sat in front of it and barked again. Dwyer ran her hand along the edge. "This is fake," she said. "Help me." They pulled the shelf back, revealing a false wall with a narrow door behind it. It was locked with a bolt, the kind used on industrial freezers. An agent stepped forward with a crowbar, forced the bolt open, and pulled the door wide. There, curled in the far corner of the room, was Callie Monroe. She was wrapped in a blanket too thin for warmth, her knees drawn to her chest, her face pale and smeared with tears. In her arms was a teddy bear, not the one Max had brought, but an exact copy, right down to the mismatched stitches. She looked up as the light flooded in, blinking, frozen like a deer in headlights. Then Max barked once, dropped his bear, and ran to her. Her breath caught. "Max," she whispered. He whined, tail wagging so hard his whole back end shook. She broke into sobs, wrapping her arms around his neck, burying her face in his fur. "You found me," she cried. "I knew you would. I told them you would come." And Max, worn down, hurting, and still bleeding beneath his bandages, let out a soft, relieved huff and laid his head in her lap. He had done it. He had brought her home. Callie sat wrapped in a soft blanket, her knees tucked under her chin, a cup of warm apple juice clutched in both hands. Her cheeks were still streaked with dirt, her lips dry and cracked, but her eyes, those wide brown eyes, were clearer now. She was safe. She knew it. Max lay beside her, head resting on her foot, his breathing slow, and even his body finally able to rest. Riley sat across from her in the quiet room at the hospital. He didn't press. He didn't rush her. He just waited, letting her speak when she was ready. Callie looked down at the bear in her lap. Not the one Max had carried, but the other one, the copy they'd forced on her when they took the original away. She held it like a shield. "I knew something was wrong," she said finally, her voice barely above a whisper. "With Uncle Aaron. I saw him hurting one of the other girls. She was younger than me. She cried all the time." She glanced up, eyes clouded. "I told him I didn't like it. He smiled and told me to keep my mouth shut. Said my mom would be in trouble too if I said anything. I didn't believe him." Riley stayed quiet, his pen still. "One night, I used his phone," she continued. "He left it on the table. I saw messages, pictures, videos. I took one of those little cards, the ones you stick in the phone, and I put it in the bear. I cut a hole in the back and tucked it deep inside, where the stuffing is thick." She reached down and gently stroked Max's ear. "I told Max everything. I whispered it in his ear when we were alone. I told him I didn't know where they were taking me, but that someone needed to know. I told him to go home. I told him to bring the bear." She looked up again, this time with tears welling. "I thought maybe he'd try, but I didn't think it would work. I mean, he's just a dog, right?" Riley shook his head. "No, Callie, he's not just a dog. Not to you. Not to any of us now." She smiled faintly and leaned her cheek against Max's head. He waited until no one was looking. The door was open just a crack. I gave him the bear and told him to run. I heard shouting. I heard someone fall. Then he was gone." Her voice broke a little. "I thought maybe he'd get caught. Maybe they'd hurt him. But I hoped. Every night I prayed that Max would find someone. That he'd find my mom. That he'd find you." Riley reached over and set the original bear on the table, the one Max had carried all that way through rain and woods and roads. The fur was still stained. One eye was missing, but the stitches held. Callie reached for it and hugged it close. "He never gave up," she whispered. "Not even when I couldn't see him anymore. He remembered. He knew." And Max, still curled at her feet, let out a soft sigh, as if to say yes. He had heard her. He had listened. And he had delivered the truth she buried. The wind was gentle that morning, brushing through the trees that lined the street in front of the newly rebuilt Marlow Police Department. It carried the smell of fresh-cut grass and blooming flowers, and a quiet hum of people gathering in the courtyard, all drawn by the same reason. A large white cloth was draped over something in the center, surrounded by folding chairs and cameras and curious onlookers. At the front row stood Callie Monroe, now a little taller, her hair pulled back neatly, her small hands holding the same teddy bear Max had once carried through rain and blood and darkness. She wore a navy blue dress and stood beside her mother Dana, who had one hand resting gently on her daughter's shoulder. Max was there too, gray around the muzzle now, slower in his step, but still standing tall. He sat calmly beside Callie, his eyes half closed, tail brushing the ground in slow, steady movements. The mayor stepped up to the microphone, his voice warm and steady as he spoke of bravery, of loyalty, of one dog who had changed the course of a case no one else could solve. Behind him, officers from all over the state stood shoulder to shoulder, hats in hand, watching. When the cloth was finally pulled away, the crowd went still. There, cast in bronze, was Max. The statue showed him lying down, head raised slightly, ears alert. Between his front paws rested a teddy bear, detailed right down to the missing eye and the hand-sewn stitches. He wasn't growling or barking or chasing. He was waiting, watchful and patient, just as he had been that night at the station. The plaque beneath it was simple. Max, he didn't just find the truth. He carried it. Callie stepped forward slowly and placed a single daisy at the base of the statue. Then she looked up at the dog frozen in time beside the bear that had saved her life, and smiled. She still had the real bear. She kept it on her bed, patched and worn but never replaced. It didn't matter that she had newer toys now, or a room full of warm blankets and soft pillows. That bear had been with her in the worst place, and it reminded her every day that even when no one could hear her, someone had been listening. Someone had come. And every night, as the world slowed down and the lights dimmed, Callie still reached for it. Some nights, she cried into it. Other nights, she whispered to it. But always, Max was there too, curled at her feet, his body a warm shield, his breathing deep and even, at peace at last. He didn't watch the door like he used to. He didn't flinch at creaks in the walls. He knew she was safe now. He had done what he was meant to do. And for the first time in a long time, so had she. Because Max hadn't just carried the truth. He carried her. If you made it this far, you felt the power of this story. Tap like to show your support, and subscribe so you don't miss the next one that might just stay with you forever.